Welcome everyone to Babies on the Homefront, Caregiving While Caring for Your Young Child Part 2, a deeper dive into effective strategies. I would like to start by going over some housekeeping items. On the right-hand side of your screen, there is a question box option. You can click on this and then type in a question or a comment, and it will be shared with the group. Please be advised that if you send a question or a comment, the name you use to register for this webinar will be displayed to the group. If you do not feel comfortable sharing your name, feel free to email your question to Julia Yuri with 0 to 3, and she has posted her email in that question box, email address, I should say. You might also find it helpful to have pen and paper available to jot down information for yourself as needed. Let's get started. The VA Caregiver Support Program is thrilled to partner with 0 to 3 to present this webinar to you. The VA Caregiver Support Program is a national program with supports offered to veterans and their caregivers. Various services are available to maintain a veteran's independence in their home. Some of these supports, for example, include a home health aide, home-based primary care, and respite care. Loved ones assisting with a veteran's care can access education and training related to caregiving, as well as emotional support. Many caregivers face questions about military transitions home, PTSD symptom management, how to care for an ill or injured veteran while managing all of life's responsibilities. We are here to support your needs. If you would like to know more about the services and supports through the VA Caregiver Program, we invite you to call the support line at 1-855-260-3274. Licensed social workers are available to assist you Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. There's also a lot of information available on our website, which is www.caregiver.va.gov. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Jennifer Novak is the Senior Writer and Training Specialist for Military Family Projects at 0 to 3. She holds a Master's in Social Work from Florida State University. She works to develop resources designed to support military families with young children and provides training and technical assistance to professionals who support these families. She has a specialty focus on the needs of children and families impacted by trauma and applies a trauma-informed lens in the creation of these tools. As a former military spouse for nearly a decade, she brings personal experience and knowledge of the issues surrounding military and veteran families to her work. Our other presenter, Julia Yuri, is the Director of Military Family Projects at 0 to 3. She received her Master's in Social Work from the University of Hawaii and is clinically licensed and endorsed in infant mental health. Julia has developed numerous resources and trainings across the country to support professionals in their work with families who have experienced trauma, grief, or loss, including the 0 to 3 app, Babies on the Homefront. Julia is a daughter of a 3-war veteran and the spouse of a Marine who retired after 30 years of service. She is very aware of issues surrounding being a child of a military service member, a daughter of a veteran, and has experienced firsthand being the spouse of a service member and parenting young children through multiple deployments, family separations, and transitions inherent in military life. I would like to now turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Novak, and I'm the Senior Writer and Training Specialist with Military Family Projects at 0 to 3. I am so excited to be able to spend this hour with you sharing information about strategies to help support you as a care provider for your veteran while you're also caring for young children in the home. Julia and I had the pleasure of presenting a part 1 version of this presentation a couple of months ago. Now, if you were not able to attend part 1 and are interested in knowing more about that content, we will be diving into that a little bit in today's presentation. However, if you look in the question and answers box, there is a link to where you can find a recording for that to view at a later time. And it isn't necessary to have viewed that in order to participate in today's webcast. We're also excited to have a very conversational style webcast for you. While participants will be on mute for this presentation, you are welcome to use that questions box in the chat box to share your thoughts and ideas around these strategies, to share about things that have worked or not worked for you. And we'd love to hear from you about how these could impact your own family and things that you have found effective. Before we go on, I do want to share a little bit about the 0 to 3 organization and what we do at Military Family Projects. So 0 to 3 was founded in 1977 by researchers and clinicians with a really strong focus on child development and the understanding that although many organizations had a focus on the needs of young children, they tended to do a lot of focus on children that were elementary aged and older. And there was really a gap in this focus on early childhood development and early childhood mental health. So from that, 0 to 3 was founded. The mission of 0 to 3 is to ensure that all babies and toddlers have a strong start in life, and we envision a society that has the knowledge and will to support all infants and toddlers in reaching their full potential. Military Family Projects is a sub-team within 0 to 3, and our specialty focus is supporting the families and professionals who work with them who are military connected and also have young children. We know that for military families, there comes a different set of experiences and challenges, either during active duty service or as a veteran. And we are dedicated to creating resources, training content, and products that can help support military connected families and the professionals who work with them. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, I strongly encourage you to share any questions you have or any thoughts in the questions box or in the chat section. And I'll watch that as we go, and Julia will be able to respond as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that we're hoping to cover tonight. We will be reviewing some key points from our Part 1 webinar. We'll also be going into learning strategies for dealing with your young child's behaviors that can be challenging as you also care for your military veteran. We know that in our Part 1 webinar, we learned generalized strategies for supporting youth. And in this one, we really want to drive home some of the specific things that you can do in order to better support your young children in this sort of tense home environment where maybe your veteran is having a lot of needs and you're being torn in different directions around where to put that energy. To support that, we're also going to be reviewing some typical scenarios caregivers of young children and their returning service members may encounter and some effective responses for that. I'm really excited that Julia will be able to help support that conversation by sharing her own ideas and opinions in addition to some of the thoughts and ideas that you guys come up with around those scenarios. Finally, we'll be sharing with you some resources to support you as a military connected caregiver. That will include resources that are available through 0 to 3 and also some of the other things that are out there that we think would be really great for individuals to link up with. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move into key points from our Part 1 webinar. So some of the key points from our Part 1 webinar have to do with the following. This first bullet point is probably one of the most important things that we want to emphasize, and that is how you are is as important as what you do. We know that as a military connected care provider, that the things that you do are so incredibly important. You're providing care to your veteran. You're providing care to children. You might also be working or caring for other adults in the home, and that can be a lot of burden and a lot of stress. And one thing that we know is that how you are doing as a care provider really impacts how effective you are whenever you're responding to the needs of everyone around you. So if you're doing well and you're engaging in self-care and mindfulness and really making sure to take care of yourself, it's more likely that you're going to be able to effectively respond to the needs of the individuals that you're supporting. But we know that we can't pour from an empty cup. And if care providers are just drained and there's no energy to give, then that can impact negatively the care that's being provided to a veteran or the responses to a child who has needs as well. We also noted in our part one webinar the importance of mindfulness. And mindfulness really is just your own capacity to be able to take a step back mentally and pay attention to how you're feeling in the moment and really reflect on, is my stress and tension impacting the way I'm responding to others? It's the capacity to notice when there's chaos going on around you. Maybe your toddler's upset and you're the veteran you're caring for is having a rough day. And are you becoming part of that tension cycle? Is it escalating? Or are you able to really take that breath and pay attention to how you're reacting before you go and engage with your child or before you go and engage with your veteran? Another key point from our part one webinar was the importance of holding your child in mind. And what we mean by this is understanding that even very young children have their own perspective on what's going on in the home, their own observations, and that many times their challenging behaviors are a result of some need that they have that they're not really able to communicate to us. So that capacity to say, yes, my child is tantruming, and yes, that's a frustrating behavior, but what does that behavior say about what my child needs from me? And investments can I make where I'm not strapping myself in order to meet those needs, but I am still providing what my child is asking for. We also went through common behaviors in children that might be challenging, and we've heard a lot of these in the past. So tantruming, whining, clinginess. We've also heard of other behaviors that are a bit more scary. So hair pulling or actively becoming violent if they're upset and that type of thing. So in a part one, we talked about some of those common behaviors. And while right now we're not going to dive into what those are and how to respond to each of them, we do want to recognize that it's normal. You know, children that are experiencing stress are going to behave in ways that are sometimes unpredictable. And just understanding that's a natural part of the process for a child that's living in a home where there's lots of stuff going on that they don't understand, that they're acting out is something that we should anticipate versus being surprised by. And then we also covered general techniques for preventing and responding to challenging behaviors. And a lot of that had to do with, again, being mindful, holding your child in mind, and making sure to interpret any actions that your child is engaging in as a direct result of them having an unmet need. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the next part of our webinar, where we're going to dive into some more specific things about how we can support our children and our veteran. Before we do, though, I'm going to ask some rhetorical questions for the audience, and you can chat in if you would like to, if you've ever felt this way. If you prefer not to, that's totally fine, but I'd like for you to consider some of the following. So, have you ever felt that providing care for your veteran means less quality time with your child or your children? Our next question, have you ever felt that providing care for your veteran creates tension in the home? And finally, Have you ever felt that providing care for your veteran negatively impacts your own parenting? So I see at least one yes, and I'm sure that there's probably a few more. And the reason why we bring this up is not to start things on a down note, but it's to really normalize that these things are incredibly common among individuals that are providing veteran care while working with young children in the home. In 2014, the RAND Institute did a study of military connected caregivers and asked them questions just like these. And I want to share with you some of the results of that. They found that about 44% of post 9/11 caregivers agreed or strongly agreed that caregiving was a burden on spending quality time with their children. So almost half. 46% of post 9/11 caregivers agreed or strongly agreed that caregiving created a lot of tension in the household. Not just a little bit of tension, but a lot. And that was about half of those respondents. And then 27% of post 9/11 caregivers agreed or strongly agreed, and this was the exact wording used in the study, that caregiving made them a worse parent. So we know that these challenges are really impactful and that they can be really difficult to work through, which is why we are so happy to have the opportunity to share some of the strategies that we know can be helpful to try whenever you're in these situations of providing care to both a veteran and a young child. So some of the impacts of caregiving on parenting that we've found in research. We know that stressful situations such as combat injuries and ongoing caregiving responsibilities can sometimes lead to negative interactions between parents and children. Now, that might mean you, as the care provider and parent, having negative interactions. So, for example, if it's been an incredibly stressful day, your veteran is escalated, your child is escalated, you might respond to a child asking for something by snapping or losing your temper, right? So something that you would probably prefer to not do. But because of that stress in the home and all of the other factors in place, that can lead to negative interactions between you and your child. We also know that the veteran parent can have negative interactions as well. So those living with combat injuries or other impacts from their service can lead to them needing things like quiet time or alone time or just the ability to be able to walk away. And sometimes young children have a really hard time understanding that. And if that's left unchecked, it can lead to negative interactions between that veteran and that child. We also know that children that are the children of veteran caregivers are at higher risk of social isolation. The same study that I referenced before found that 75% of caregivers engaged in community activities 3 times or less in the past month, meaning that themselves and their children really weren't engaging in the sort of the community and resources that were out there. And we know that a lot of that has to do with, how do I make the time for something like that? But whenever children aren't able to go to preschool because it's so hard to coordinate travel or to find the funds to pay for something like that, it puts them at risk of that social isolation. And as a care provider, it puts you at risk of social isolation as well. And we know those social connections are so important in order to be successful whenever you're working through being a veteran care provider and also being a parent. Another point on here is that it can be easy to lapse into a routine where everything's revolving around the person you're caring for without as much priority on the children and yourself. So we've heard anecdotes about care providers who really just, if their veteran has a need, they stop everything, they deal with it. And we know that that's such an important thing to do, but it's so, it's delicate how you balance that with the needs of your children. So we don't really have a good answer for that, but it is something to consider as you work in your home and as you work with your veteran. How do you balance the needs of your child with the veteran's needs and kind of make sure that everyone's having something met? And then finally, We also find that it can be difficult to effectively communicate about what the veteran is going through in language that children can understand. So if children are not being told about why the veteran parent is struggling or what's going on with them, sometimes they can get really confused. They might blame themselves for some of those things. So even though young children can be difficult to communicate to about this, we have some ideas about things that you can try if you're struggling to think about how you can communicate the needs of your veteran to your young child. All right, so a few of the things that we would encourage everyone to try before we move into some of our scenarios. How can we prevent the negative impacts of these issues on parenting? One is to remember to engage in mindfulness and self-care in order to alleviate the stress of caregiving before it impacts parenting. I'll explain more about mindfulness and self-care in a moment. In the chat box or in the questions box, I would love for any individuals that are participating, if you have self-care or mindfulness activities that really work well for you or things that you've made a priority, please go ahead and chat those in. I feel like we always learn a new strategy whenever we get those responses, so please go ahead and start sending them in, and I'll dive into this in a little a bit deeper right now. So remember, engaging in mindfulness, this means giving yourself the mental space to be able to take a step back, observe how you're feeling, and really pay attention to how a stressor or how what's going on in the home might be impacting you and your own functioning. A mindfulness exercise that I've used in the past, and you can actually do with children as well, is something called belly breathing. And I'll walk you through what this is now. So belly breathing is really a physical exercise that integrates touch with paying attention to the breath. So in this exercise, we place our hands on our stomach and we just notice how our stomach moves as we're breathing. And as we breathe in, we feel how our stomach moves. And as you're breathing, just notice how you're feeling right now. Is there something on your mind that's distracting or a bit stressful? Is there any tension in your shoulders, neck, or somewhere else in your body that you think would be helpful to just sort of breathe out and let go? And just doing that for a few moments to bring yourself back to center, either as a regular part of your routine or whenever you start feeling overwhelmed. A really great way of just bringing yourself back to present moment. Other ideas for self-care, again, there's so many. I see that we had a comment or a question about sharing some of the free mindfulness apps. So while I know that all of the mindfulness apps have both paid and free versions. One that I personally like is Calm, and there's also another one called Headspace. And I promise we're not getting any endorsements from these companies. These are just ones that I have found personally helpful. But bearing in mind that those apps do have free versions and then paid versions as well. But Calm is actually a really great one, especially for veterans as well. That's right, Calm and Headspace. Calm has a nighttime stories function, and I've worked with and known veterans who have used that to help them calm before they start to drift off to sleep. And they're also really wonderful for children too. All right, our next strategy is finding the time and prioritizing keeping yourself and your children socially engaged. So really what this means is instead of treating social activities as the last thing on the to-do list, is to really take the time to think about how can I get out there in the community? What are things that I can do with my child that they'll enjoy? What connections can I make? Maybe it's just attending, a parenting group once a week, going to the library together, attending community events, other things like that. But anything that works for you and your children, just so that you are going out there and making those connections. Our third piece here is remembering to hold the child in mind. How are they experiencing the impacts of caregiving? how can you hold their feelings and needs in mind when also balancing the needs of your veteran? This one's really complicated. When it comes to the needs of children, especially young children, there's a lot of individual factors at play, and every family is going to be different. It has to do with things like your own child's functioning and development, their age, their temperament, their personality. It also is contingent on what are the needs of your veteran. Are they usually doing pretty well and just have the occasional rough day? Or are most of their days pretty hard and they only occasionally have a good day? So that's going to be a really personal thought process around how do I balance those two different needs as a care provider. But just remembering that you can hold both of those in mind as you make decisions about how you direct your energy. And then finally, we have this last bullet, using the language to explain the needs of the veteran to your young child so that they can better understand what the veteran is going through. Now, that might seem like a really hard task whenever we're looking at, very young or even pre-verbal children. So one of the great anecdotes that I saw when I was researching for this presentation was the use of the analogy of the turtle. So telling a child that their parent is kind of like a turtle. When a turtle is feeling calm or happy or they're really comfortable in their environment, what do? They stick their head out, they walk around, sometimes a bit slow, sometimes really fast and excited, but they do come out of their shell. But whenever that turtle senses that there's something that might be scary or something that could harm them, right? What does a turtle do? It pulls right back up into its shell. And then the turtle has to decide when it's safe to come back out. That could be a really wonderful analogy to offer to a child. Julia shared during our webinar earlier today that even using something like a physical stuffed animal turtle as a cue that your veteran is having a hard day for your child to understand, all right, the veteran parent is pulling into their shell right now, so we have to be mindful of that. That those are tools that you can try in order to help support your child in understanding what's going on. And Julia, you had also made a point during our last webcast about explaining the needs of the veteran that are less sort of metaphorical. Would you like to share with the audience some thoughts on that too?
Sure. I think sometimes we worry about parents that we have to just say it so perfectly or come up with something really clever like the turtle, which I actually really love that metaphor. But when we think about sharing information with kids, we want to be really honest and upfront with them, but we want to share information at their developmental level. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be something like as simple as, daddy sometimes has problems with his big emotions. And so when he's feeling that way, we help him out and we help him to heal by being really quiet and using our quiet voices and then helping the child like exaggerate whispering, for example. So that's just one example where you can just kind of use just very simple language, very direct language without having to worry about finding some clever way of saying it. Although feel free to steal the turtle because I think that's good.
Thank you, Julia. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into some of our scenario-based discussions. And for these, we've sort of culled from research and from our own experience, really common things that as a veteran care provider, you might experience. These might have happened to you in the past or something that you can be prepared for in the future. What we'd like for us to do at this time is I'm going to read the scenario and pause to get you thinking about it. Then we'll have Julia and myself sort of share our own thoughts, but we would love for you to use that opportunity to chat into the question and answer box your own thoughts on this and things that you've tried, and then we'll share and review those as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our first scenario. So what can we do in this situation? Your child is young, active, and loud. And I picked this picture of my daughter when she was 2 because this was her to a T. Your veteran often reacts negatively to loud noises and can easily become overwhelmed when your child is too feisty. The child needs to express themselves, but the veteran parent needs quiet to support their own healing. So, reflecting on that, what are some things that we could do in this situation to help meet the needs of our child and also meet the needs of our veteran? While we're waiting for chatted in responses, Julia, would you like to share some of your thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. I think one of the first things to remember, and we covered this in the first webinar if you weren't able to attend that one, is really the first thing you need to do in this scenario is check in with yourself. How am I responding? Because when we're concerned about the well-being of the people we love, we can have a very strong emotional reaction. And if you know that loudness is a trigger for your veteran when they're feeling kind of overwhelmed, then we may kind of have this great anxiety, and responding with that anxiety can actually cause a greater reaction in your child. So the first thing to do is to really kind of check in with yourself, and if you need to, take a couple deep breaths to kind of calm yourselves using the belly breathing that Jennifer talked about, or whatever works for you. Perhaps it's just kind of like walking into your bedroom, sighing, and then walking back out. That does it for you. But whatever you need to do to get yourself to a place where you can really be settled and be able to think about where your child is coming from. And then I think the thing to do is to really feel comfortable naming it for the child, naming their feelings, also naming what's going on, and using, not being afraid to name what's happening. So you can say, you know, Becca, you're so excited right now. I can see that you just want to use your whole body and make a lot of noise. But right now, your daddy needs some quiet because it's his healing time. So we have to use our inside voices and be quiet, and actually do exaggerated whispering, which is kind of helping your child learning about loud versus quiet. Those are concepts that are great for them to learn, and having them practice. So really kind of naming it out loud that the veteran needs some quiet it's perfectly fine to do that. Or you can say, you know what, if we really need to be loud, maybe we can go outside, because that's where we can be loud, is outside. And then take your child outside, which probably they will love if it's a nice day. So really kind of taking that as a way to help your child recognize the different states of the veteran. You can use something like that turtle we talked about and pull the turtle out. That when the turtle is out on the counter, that means we need to be quiet inside. And when the turtle is put away, that means we can be a little bit more rambunctious, and kind of helping them have visual cues for what's going on. Again, it doesn't have to be a turtle. It can be anything that kind of feels right for your family. On another thing that we have in our app, Babies on the Homefront, which you'll hear more about, lots of suggestions in there, but you might want to check out the quiet place. And one of the things it's under the activities section of Babies on the Homefront. And then there's advice based on your child's age, what you might have in the quiet place. But having a quiet space designated, both when your child's feeling dysregulated, you can have your child go with her, and it's a place that stimulates quiet. Maybe there's a beanbag that you can sit on. Books that are quiet books. We know that there's noisy books too, but quiet books. Maybe there's some quiet activities, maybe some sensory things for the child to touch quietly without making a lot of noise. Or maybe there's a way to play quiet music, like lullaby music. So all of those things are things you can do to help the child differentiate between time to be loud and rambunctious and time to be quiet. So those are a couple ideas. And I see that we have a great idea as well from one of our participants. And so Jennifer, will you want to share that?
Yeah, so I see that we have this idea around taking the child to an area without the veteran, nurturing both the best you can, definitely. And sometimes that space is really just what's needed whenever a child's not at that point where they can really regulate. We know that this is a really common challenge and something that comes up quite frequently. And one of the things that I like to share about this is that not only, even though this is challenging, it's also providing an opportunity for you to, as a parent, start teaching your child some of those self-regulation skills, especially if you're approaching it in the manner that Julia shared, where we're really just trying to shush and trying to teach children how to calm themselves. And that's going to take a lot of time, especially if you have a very high energy toddler. But it is a great opportunity for them to start practicing those self-regulation skills. Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and move on to our next scenario. So our next scenario, your veteran has spent most of your child's life away from home and is trying to build attachment with your child. However, your child just isn't warming up to the veteran parent, and the veteran parent is becoming upset and sad that their child doesn't seem to like them very much. So go ahead and reflect on this for a moment, and please chat into the questions box or the chat around what are some things that you could do, or what are things that have worked for you and your family. And again, while we're waiting for those responses, Julia, would you like to share some thoughts on this one?
Sure. Had to unmute my phone. One of the things I'd like to direct your attention to is the app Babies on the Homefront. And again, we put a lot of thought into putting some ideas in here. If you download the app, you can actually put in your child's month of birth and year of birth, and then filter by the age of your child. You can also filter it by status. And you say, if you set it on veteran, some of the things that you have under behavior tips are things like, when I push you away, then I cry, or when I act like I don't care, or when I act afraid of my returning parent. And there's some tips on how you might handle that. So that's something you can go to. And one of the things that's nice about it is you can actually share that with your veteran and say, see, this is normal. This happens all the time. That's the reason why they wrote these things in the app, is because, you know, all kids go through this, and really help to normalize it. And we also, under playtime, you'll see that there's different strategies that can work. And one of my favorite is the one that says, that looks like fun. And this is an activity that you can encourage the veteran to do. And again, I'm just going to read this out loud real fast to you. It's getting to know you may take me a little time. All of the articles are written in the voice of the child for the play and for the behavior. So getting to know you may take me a little time. This is a great way to help me to get over being shy or hesitant to play with you. Get down on the floor and start playing with my toys and act like you're having a lot of fun. Before you know it, you may see me getting closer and closer until I'm joining in the fun. Remember, as a toddler, I may not really understand how to play with you. I may play beside you, imitating what you are doing. But once I join you in play, let me take the lead, showing you how much I'm willing to do. If I get tired of one activity and start another, let me. It's the way I play and learn. See how you can join me in my new activity. Before too long, you will find me initiating play with you. And what that little itty bitty paragraph does is it helps to normalize the situation, helps the veteran have an idea of what they can do, a concrete activity, because sometimes that's what's needed, and also helps them to understand early child development, that kids don't play with one thing for a long time. They go 2 minutes on this, 5 minutes on that, 1 minute on that. That's just how little kids play. And so helping, again, share some normal child development as well. So those are a couple of ideas that might help you help the veteran feel more comfortable as they get to know their child and their child gets to know them.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. We have a couple of comments too. Some of them echoing some of the things that you've shared. One from Harriet is, create and find opportunities for the parent to do activities together with the child. Yeah, so definitely that's a wonderful way of approaching it. Let's see, I see another comment. We tried family bonding and group family events for trust, but this was a very big issue as they stepped out while others stepped up. Vicki, if you want to share more about that with us, I think that's a great discussion around, well, what happens if people aren't engaged, the other parent isn't as engaged? It may not be something that we have a lot of time to dive into deeply, but it definitely is something that's worth exploring. While we're looking at that, let's go ahead and move into our next scenario. All right. So in this one, you are the full-time care provider for your veteran. Your young child has become excessively clingy, sometimes refusing to be away from you for even a moment. As much as you want to be able to provide this attention, you simply don't have the energy or capacity to do so. So what can we do? This is a situation where your child needs you and you're just so strapped, you're so pulled in different directions that you simply can't provide that much attention in that moment. So go ahead and reflect on that for a second. And while we're waiting for chatted in responses, Julia, do you want to share some of your insights on this one?
Sure. And also just to mention a little bit on the comment about a parent stepping out while others stepped up. I know that I think that at group family events, it's sometimes really hard because people they have different comfort levels. They have different things that are perhaps reminding them of things that make them feel uncomfortable or anxious. And so I think that setting and the home setting may be different. It may be the same. So it's always trying things at many places rather than just one sometimes makes a difference. And remembering that it takes time. I don't know how many of you have seen the book Home Again, written by Dorinda Williams, that was available through Military One Source when you were active duty. And some of you are still eligible for active duty if you're only a year out of active service. And it's a book that talks about every child has a different reaction to their parent coming home. And so helping to normalize that we each have our individual way is helpful. In this particular scenario that Jennifer just shared, if I want to go into that a little bit, I think if we talk about kind of, again, going back to the basics of what we talk about in responding to children when they have needs is first making sure that we're checking in with ourselves, but then really trying to decide, what does that behavior say? What is the child trying to say through their behavior? Have you been not able to spend as much time with that child, that they're feeling a little bit more clingy? Has there been a change recently in maybe the hours of when you go to bed, when you wake up, or childcare providers, or even visits from grandma and grandpa, which are something the child might really look forward to? Any change, any disruption in a child's routine can sometimes lead a child who has a little bit of anxiety to get even clingier. So that's, again, normal. So trying to figure out what's going on helps. And then name it, really name it, and say to your child, you seem really like you want to be so close to mommy, right by my side. I wonder what's going on with you. I wonder if maybe you're feeling a little worried today because we changed your time you went to bed last night. I wonder if that's what's going on. So again, helping your child to understand. So naming it to tame it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. In a situation where you just don't have any time, it's hard. And so get some help. And one of the best ways of getting help, and this is also on the app Babies on the Homefront under the self-care section, is getting a child helper, a teenager that's maybe a 12-year-old that you maybe not quite old enough to leave your children alone with, but paying them a small amount to come into your home and play with the kids while you're there with your kids too. You can sometimes train that child then to become a babysitter as they get a little bit older. So getting a parent helper might be a way to give yourself a little bit of time. And then lastly, finding ways for your child to do something with you. So for instance, if you have to do dishes, giving them access to the sink on a chair with you standing right next to them so that they're safe, so they can play with the water in a bowl of water and a spoon while you're loading the dishwasher. that is a good way of kind of keeping them busy. And I have to say that one last thing is that for all that's going on, children are quite resilient. And something that really helps for children when there's a lot of changes going on or a lot of things happening in the house is something that researchers call special play. And this is just taking 15 minutes out of your day where you just play with that child and let it be child-led, and calling it special playtime with your child. So you can even say to them, you know, I know you want me to play with you right now, and I'm sorry I can't because I need to do this chore or I need to go on this appointment with your mom or whatever it might be. But remember, after dinner, before your bath, we're going to have special playtime. And so it gives the child something to look forward to, and they know they're going to have that special time with you. So those are just a few of the things that come to mind as I think about this. And now I want to read what people wrote. So Jennifer, I'm going to let you take over while I read some of these things that people are talking about.
Yeah, that sounds great. So if you want to look at some of those, I know there's quite some lengthy ones. So I'll go ahead and move into our next slide portion, and then we can revisit some of our questions and comments afterward as well. So this is another one that, you know, it can be really, really tricky. In this scenario, you and your veteran agreed months ago to take a trip out of state to see relatives. Your young child knows about this trip and is very excited. They've packed a bag, they have toys ready for the trip, and they talk about it constantly. The morning of the trip, your veteran suffers an extreme panic attack and states that they will not go. So, Julia, I know that you're probably still reviewing questions and answers, so I'll go ahead and respond to this one. And again, if you, as a participant, have thoughts on this and would like to share, please do so in the question and answer section. So one of the key things about this particular scenario is sort of preventing what the possibility of this happening is before you get to that point. And what I mean is, if you have a veteran who is already prone or has experienced panic attacks, then when you're planning something, whether it's a trip out of state or if it's a trip out to the grocery store, what is your plan B? If the child has an expectation for an event or an activity and your veteran is not able to participate in that, as a family, what can you agree to do in those situations where you're still holding the child in mind while your veteran is dealing with what they need to do? So some ideas around this one could be talking about with your veteran, you know, you have panic attacks, and if something like that happens, what can we do? Would it be acceptable for me and our child to go ahead and leave for the trip and for you to join us later? Would it be appropriate to just wait until you've calmed and then revisit whether we can all go together or not? And then if it's really not going to happen, or if you're in a situation where you can't leave because of the needs of your veteran, then what are some other opportunities or activities that you can offer to the child where that sense of excitement is met through other fun things that they get to do, even though the original plan may not be happening? But we know, again, that children can be really, really, disappointed when things like this come up. And this is that idea of, again, holding the child in mind as you are balancing the needs of your veteran. Julia, before we move on, do you have any other comments on this one?
I think that you covered it really, really well. I think one of the things that I just wanted to add is that kids are so flexible, and so it doesn't take much to help them have a good time. And so if you have to cancel your trip, if you decide that's what's best for the family, you can also then say to the kids, you know what, we're not going to go on a trip, but instead we're going to camp out in our living room or in our backyard, depending if you have a yard or not, and just make it fun. We're going to use our clothes out of our suitcase, and we're going to pretend we're on a big trip, and we're going to sleep together in this living room in the tent. And those kinds of adventures for kids, they remember those forever, even though you're going, well, I wanted to go on this trip. Your kids are going to be resilient if you're resilient. So they're going to take their cues from you. And so breathe, take care of you, and know that your kids are going to be fine if you are fine. So how you are is as important as what you do.
Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and move into our last scenario. And Julia, thank you so much for responding to our questions. So if you've typed in a question, those are being addressed in text right now. Being mindful of time, we're going to go ahead and share our last one before wrapping up with some closing thoughts and then resources. So what can we do? Your veteran parent does their best to help co-parent, but there are times, and sometimes full days, where they simply cannot do so. Your child loves spending time with their veteran parent and becomes hurt and upset when the veteran parent isn't able to provide them attention. So if you have thoughts or ideas around this one, please go ahead and take a moment to reflect and then share those through the chat. And then I'll also go ahead and share some thoughts on this one. This particular scenario is hard because we know that in these situations, if a veteran parent wants to co-parent and is not capable of doing so, there's hurt kind of on all sides, right? The veteran parent might feel guilty about not being able to help with the child. You as a parent might feel like you're having all of this stress and pressure put on yourself. And then finally, there's the needs of the child. The child might be feeling hurt and stressed. So we really have to come to this understanding as a family then that this is the situation. The veteran parent needs this time away, and we're going to do all we can to support that, but it's nobody's fault. There is no one to blame for this particular problem. So starting with the child, helping the child to understand, again, the needs of your veteran, talking with them openly about the things that they're dealing with and what's going on with them, having that language of communication where they understand that mommy or daddy or whoever their parent is having a hard time, and there are moments where or days where they're not going to be able to be present with them, but that they still love them and they still care about them, and that it's not the child's fault whenever this happens. And then it also means holding on to the notion that the veteran that isn't able to help co-parent isn't doing this because they don't want to. It's because of their own healing needs. So having empathy for that and really helping to support them as they work through those complicated feelings of needing to engage in their own healing while having that need to also parent as well. Before we move on, I just want to check and see if there's any chats related to this one. I don't think there are, but also to Julia, if you have any closing thoughts on this scenario or any of the other ones that we've discussed.
I'm sure. Vicki does have a question that I want to make a comment on. One of the things that I'll get to that question in a minute, but one of the things that I want to say about this one is, you know, sometimes if you can develop some rituals between the parent and child that help the child feel connected to that parent, it's very helpful. And one idea that I want to share is that when the veteran knows that they just aren't up to it right now, you know, that's okay. And there was an earlier comment. It's always okay to tell your child, you know what, mom is really tired right now and not feeling well. Can we do this another time? Always, yes. Let your child see that you're taking care of yourself. That's great modeling. But one of the things you can do when you feel like the child is really kind of having a hard time is actually do something to help your child feel connected back to you. And so one of the ideas is, for instance, again, back to the turtle idea, you can say, you know what, I can't do this right now. I need to spend some quiet time. But how about if you hold on to this turtle for me until I'm feeling like we can play? Would you do that for me? Would you hold this for me? And that kind of becomes a transitional object connecting the child and the parent. It doesn't have to be a turtle. It can be, depending on the child's age, it could be a baseball cap, for instance. Why don't you hold on to daddy's baseball cap until daddy's ready to come and play with you? Or it can be a special blanket, or it can be just anything that symbolizes the connection between the parent and child. So I think that can help, again, kind of extend that relationship out. The other thing I just wanted to say really quickly is when you have emotional those invisible injuries, it's really hard for the child to see something's going on. So that's the reason why it's so important to be really clear and not hesitate to communicate. So you say, mommy's feeling a lot of big emotions right now and can't play like she wants to, but daddy's here and daddy will be here to take care of you until mommy can join us. So really being open about what's going on, and that'll help the children to learn how to do that as well. And what a great modeling of emotional communication. The one thing you want to watch for is gatekeeping. When a veteran tries to help with something, this is how you do it, you're doing it wrong. Even diapering, I learned from my mother-in-law is to let them do it wrong, and they'll figure it out when they're holding the child and things leak out, that they have to do it differently. My mother-in-law told me that when her husband, when she first brought her first child home, she felt guilty and felt like it was her job to do all the caregiving for the children. And then she basically cut him out. And so then he didn't feel like he could help. So that's something that we have to watch for as well as caregivers, is that we're allowing the other parent to participate as much as possible. And then one last real quick comment, advice about when a vet refuses the child and refuses contacts. Again, help the child understand that it's not anything that they've done. Put it in words. Right now, your mommy or your daddy it is trying to get better and feel better about what's going on, and right now they are having a hard time connecting with you, but it's not because you've done anything wrong. It's because they need to heal. They need time to get better and think about what they're feeling, and so it's not you, it's them. Making sure they have that without making the parent the bad guy, without demonizing that parent, so that when hopefully that veteran is ready at some point and is able to come, that there can be some healing, because children like knowing both parents are involved in their lives. It's not always possible, but we want to leave that door open. Meanwhile, if the vet is open, help connect them to some of the materials that we're offering today so that they understand some of their own healing isn't going to hurt the child as long as we're open and we're talking about it, and we're have safety things and plans that when the vet needs time by themselves, that they can find that time, and they're not triggered by the child by insisting that the child stay with the veteran even when they're not in a place to deal with the child's rambunctiousness or feistiness. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Julia. All right, let's go ahead and move into some of our closing slides. I'm really mindful that we just have a few minutes left before the end of our webcast tonight. So just a couple of other things to keep in mind that we want to emphasize. Just making sure to engage in those wellness activities, and that really is the backbone of being able to respond effectively to both your veteran and your child, is really prioritizing your own need for self-care. And then on top of that, having that strong social support network. And if you don't have a strong social support network, then really going out there and actively attempting to build one, because we know those social connections are really the things that help fill the gaps in getting needs met for kids.
And the caregiver support line can help with that. I just had to throw that in there. That
thank you.
If you're feeling alone, please call the caregiver support line and connect with them. They have great support.
We also want to emphasize this last point too. We know that this is kind of it can seem kind of like a doom and gloom topic. We're like, oh my gosh, like there's so many things that we have to deal with and worries for our children. But I do want to point out these research-based positive outcomes that being the child of a veteran that needs care, that they do have increased resilience, they do have increased self-sufficiency, and they do have increased compassion. So this experience of living through this is something that can be a really positive thing for children too, to see these things and then to grow from them. We want to share with you just a couple of things before we close. So 0 to 3, as Julia mentioned, has developed a ton of resources for military and veteran families. So we strongly encourage you to go to the 0 to 3 website. Many materials are available through the VTT website. Some are available through Military Once Worth. So please go ahead and take the time to look at what's on the website and contact us if you have a question about the availability of something. We're more than happy to address that with you. We also have a wonderful resource called the Babies on the Homefront app, which Julia's mentioned several times. It's available for free in English or Spanish from the iTunes Store and the Google Play Store. If you want to learn more about it, you can do so by visiting babiesonthehomefront.org or searching for the app in the device app store of your choice. We also have a link for the Babies on the Homefront Caregivers group. This is a group for military connected care providers and the professionals who support them in order to provide a space where people can engage in conversation, share resources, ask questions, and that's moderated by myself and Julia. So we really invite you to join us there and learn more about what we're doing. If you just search the Babies on the Homefront Caregivers group in Facebook, it'll pop right up and you can put in a request to join and we'd love to have you. Finally, we want to make sure that we're thanking USAA for their support. They were generous to provide what we needed in order to enhance the Babies on the Homefront app and for all of these opportunities to provide training and webcasts for our audiences. And then finally, we just want to really take a second to thank all of you so much. We know that military connected families are so resilient and you have such a unique perspective and really are just supporting the work of this nation in ways that many people will never know the extent of all the things that you do. Your efforts will make the difference in not just your veteran's life, but also your child's life. And we really want to recognize how important you are as a veteran care provider. All right, finally, again, thank you so much for all of your support. Julia and myself's contact information is on this slide. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our partners at the VA Caregiver Support Line to close things up.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. The discussion was wonderful back and forth. So thank you so much to the participants and the presenters. Again, you are encouraged to call the Caregiver Support Line. Some of the topics discussed today, we're definitely able to provide some support, resources, and perspective on as well. And again, our phone number is 855-260-3274. Unfortunately for tonight, our line just closed as it's 8 p.m. and we close at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be open at 8 a.m. As well tomorrow. And we also have a voicemail that you could leave us a message and we could also get back to you. So that's always an option. And you can also take a look at our caregiver website, which is caregiver.va.gov. I mentioned that there's some mindfulness practices on there. It's a little hidden in being able to find it, so you can always give us a call and we can walk you through on how to get to that. Thank you so much to Jennifer and Julia. This was another great collaboration.
Yeah, that was a wonderful evening. We will have a copy of this on our website for those of you that would like to review it or to share with others. So definitely watch for our social media posts announcing that it's available or that the VA Caregiver Support Line might share that information with you too. You should be receiving a post-event survey, so please take the time to complete that. We'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that you really liked or things that you would want to see different in future presentations from us. With that, we'll go ahead and close the webcast, and I hope everyone has such a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.